Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our August 1st, 2023 School Board Workshop. We will be going over multiple school board policies, several that were brought by school board members, and then several staff member policies. I'll go over and hand this over to our superintendent, Superintendent Ayers.
Thank you, Chair Combs. So board members, 3 parts to our workshop this morning. Our first one is just our normal policy cycle of proposed policy revisions. The second section, we will kind of go over our 2023 legislation and rulemaking, and then finally an update discussion on policy review. With this workshop, I look forward to our conversation. Again, as we talked about in our past retreats, these workshops are meant for us to have discussion, talk through things together as a group, and hopefully to come to some consensus. So I look forward to the open discussion this morning. And at this time, for our first section for proposed policy revisions, I'm going to toss it over to Mr. Porter.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and board members and superintendent. As the superintendent said, this is a workshop, and it really is intended for you all to work through proposed policies. Traditionally, board members have the ability to propose policies. I work with staff on drafting them, and then we bring them to you. And this is the time when you all decide as a group whether the policy should go forward or not to public hearing. It's intended to be an open discussion. It's intended to vet all the potential issues with it. You should definitely hear from staff on any of the proposed policies that board members propose to understand how it impacts the district and the operations of the district. So the first one is being proposed by board member Rendon. Currently in your board policies, there is policy 0171, which is a direction for the superintendent and his staff to review the policies at least once every 2 years. The policy as proposed by member Rendon would make that a little more specific, and when a policy was adopted, the date of the policy would be added to the policy, and then a date when the policy would be reviewed would be added. And also, as part of this policy, we would formalize and codify a policy cycle, which we've talked about before. I'll remind you that before COVID, we had an aspirational goal of trying to do 4 policy cycles a year. That just didn't happen during COVID. Talked to the superintendent. He thinks, and we tend to think, that at least 3 policy cycles a year would probably cover the needs of the district. And so that's the proposed policy here, to codify the cycle, which we can discuss what looks good for you all, and then have a date that it was adopted and the date that the policy will be reviewed. And I think it would be helpful to hear from member Rendon to hear what her reasoning is behind that, and then the board can have a discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. One of the reasons that I brought this to the board is because over the course of the last 18 months, the district has been reviewing all of our policies and putting them together, figuring out where their duplications are, where we're out of date. And in looking at that our entire policies, we have many that don't have any dates on them. We have many that are not, that we don't know when they were reviewed last. We don't know. And so according to our current policy, we would be out of compliance with almost all of our policies, up to about the last 30 policies that have been reviewed in the last 2 years. Because according to this current policy, it says that we would review them every 2 years, which we've not, with the exception of a few. And so in order to bring us back into compliance during this process, we need to eliminate the fact that we have already said we're going to review everything every 2 years, and allow us to have the flexibility that when we do approve a policy, then we then set the next date of when that would be reviewed. Some things may not need to be reviewed, but every 5 years. Some things may need to be reviewed every year, depending on the priority. Of course, with legislative changes, they need to be reviewed immediately. But so I brought it so that we could go into compliance now and then move forward as we review policies and put them into a cycle.
Okay, thank you, Member Rendon. And as usual, if you will just signal to Mr. Porter if you'd like to speak, and then we'll start. Okay, Dr. Hahn.
Thank you, Member Combs. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. I know we've had a lot of discussion on getting back into a normal policy cycle. Just a few clarifications for me. One, I'm glad that we're adding the date and that we approved it and reviewed it. I know that Ms. Davis has been working on that for the last year, kind of updating all of that. I'm not sure I agree with the fact that almost all of our policies are out of compliance, because I know over the past at least 4 years, we've been really very, outside of COVID, so 5 years, so COVID kind of threw us a curveball, but, you know, we had been on a very strict policy cycle, really working hard to update our policies and make sure we were in compliance. So there's a little bit of a, so I see where it's you struck at least once every 2 years. But it's on 0173, it's once every 2 years. So not that so there's got to be some alignment there. If you're going to strike it on 0171, then you need to strike it on 0173. But I'm not really understanding why you want to get rid of once every 2 years. I understand that some may not need to be reviewed that often, but shouldn't we have some type of like standard? Why are we taking that guardrail away? So I don't know if Ms. Rendon could help me understand that a little bit clearer.
So I've reviewed the first 130 policies out of the first sections of our administrative, and then 100, 200, and 300 policies. Based upon those, we only had 20 policies that were reviewed from 2019 to present, which would be within the last 2 years. All other policies had either no date or were prior to 2019, which would put us out of compliance with this current policy. So my thought process was, we can leave it at 2 years. I am perfectly fine reviewing all policies in 2 years. I don't think the sheer number of current policies we have within this district, we can do that within 4 meetings to make sure we've reviewed every one of them and have a cycle. I think there's been times where these policies have been reviewed over a period of time, but there may not be a date attached to them. And because there's no date attached to them, we have no way of going backwards and saying when it was reviewed.
Do you think 2 years is just too little to become
No.
a mass?
To be honest with you, I wanted to get us in compliance today because of the fact of the sheer number of policies we currently have that are more than 2 years. And we are working on a process within our staff to either realign our policies. We have some duplications. They've been working on the project and being very diligent about doing that. But in order to be currently in compliance of our policies, on policy, we needed to at least have something to remove, because right now we are so out of compliance with the 2-year mark. So if we say and we remove that 2 years and at least get us into a policy cycle, then we can go back and make a judgment on each policy on whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. We don't have to limit ourselves. From a personal standpoint, I do like to see everything every 2 years. But in order for us to get in compliance, we had to eliminate that because we have so many that are not within 2 years currently.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned that if we don't have any, whether it's 2, 4, or 5, that, you know,
Agreed?
when we're all off the board, then it will, you know, just kind of, there's no guarantee that we will have a required review of policy. So that's my only.
Totally agree.
So I'm open to having more conversations, hearing from other board members, but if we are going to strike it above, then we probably have to strike it below, just to make it consistent. The other thing was where we have, as approved by the board, and to recommend appropriate additions, deletions, and changes. Each policy adopted with the board shall contain the date. Policy, I'm sorry, I reviewed this last week. Oh, you mentioned a codified cycle, so that would be more under our process and procedures, correct?
We need to hear from the board
Okay.
about what you like. I mean, the superintendent has recommended 3 cycles per year, and we can discuss that.
Okay,
That's up to you all.
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Member Hahn. Member Vaughn?
Thank you. Sorry, I probably missed the opening of that because parking. But I just want to kind of make sure I'm understanding what I did hear you say. So what I got from the conversation that I heard is that you kind of want to change this policy temporarily now so that you can start to work on making sure everything has a date. Is that what I'm understanding by compliance, that it's been reviewed and put a date by who instructed or who initiated that policy and when? Is that what the compliance piece means?
At the end of the day, if we leave the policy as it stands, we're violating our own policy.
Does that,
currently.
when you mean as it stands, meaning not where it was originated from, nor what date it has, is that what you mean by that?
The current policy states that we are going to be on a review cycle for all policies every 2 years. That means every one of our policies should have been reviewed 2001 or previous. Or later, which we have many or a lot that are non in compliance.
But when you say reviewed, I think that's the challenge that I'm trying to understand to you what official review means. So to me, reviewed means someone at staff looks at it, we make sure we're still in compliance, we're let known if there's anything in any of our policies that are out of compliance. So what I'm trying to understand is when you say has been reviewed, because what I heard you mention was many don't have a date, many don't tell where it came from. So to you, an official review means staff has pulled it, we've looked at it, we've talked about it, it's been highlighted with, was this a state policy, was this a board approved policy, it has a date, and we've talked about it. I'm trying to understand what your definition of review means.
As currently, if any policy would have a date attached to
A
it
date.
that it was last reviewed.
Okay.
If we as a board want to have it, who reviewed it, how it was reviewed, did it come out of a statute? Of course, if it is by statute, I would always put in there put in there by statute. But at this point, without a date at all, we have no way of really knowing that history.
Okay. So that helps me understand. You're looking for the date, something that shows when the last time we've actually made sure it's within the guidelines. So again, what I'm hearing is that you feel belabored by this, that with the 2 years, there's no impetus to get us in compliance and make sure all those are reviewed and make sure that we have that. So you want to change the 2 year right now, and then once we kind of get an idea of how much work that is and what it looks like, and once we're under compliance, change this again to update it to a time frame that works for the board. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. So again, when originally I had talked about this and I had proposed and said I've reviewed this many policies a few months ago and requested a policy workshop and requested 4 for the year. At the time, we had talked about the fact that the staff have been working for the last 18 months and really working on our full policy,
Right.
all of our policies, seeing the duplications and so forth. So my understanding is we are still about 6 months away from that completion. And so if we don't change this, then we have many policies that have no date, no place of where they originated from. So we would not know if they were within the 2 years or not. So my feeling is if we don't put a policy currently in place that eliminates that, we're out of compliance until this whole process is done.
But if we eliminate that, how does that make sure that we still have to do it within a certain amount of time frame? Because it says we have 2 years to do it. If we take it away at all, because right now if it says we have 2 years to do it, we don't have to wait till every 2 year. Per board direction, we can decide that at any time that we want, but it says it has to be done within 2 years. If we remove that, then we have unlimited amount of time, right? So to me, it seems like more of a hindrance in the time frame to remove it and have nothing. Then that's where I'm getting confused, and I'm just trying to understand the logic. To me, it doesn't seem like it's keeping us in that 2 years and saying we don't have to renew it now, because again, per board direction or superintendent direction, we can have those policies reviewed, as you said we've been doing by staff, and follow that. So I'm just confused on the logic of having to remove it to make sure that we're completed and up to date on the policies.
I only am suggesting the removal of it temporarily because when we have so many policies that are not dated, therefore we have no idea if they were done within the next 2 year mark. If we only have 2 more policy workshops for the next 2 months, we would have to bring hundreds of policies to this board for approval to be in compliance.
I see what you're saying.
So at the end of the day, I don't disagree, which is why I said that the staff, we as a board, when we approve it, would have a date approved and then the next date of when we would do, so we could get it into a compliance. If we don't have a date to review, then we're never on a cycle. Right now, we have no date to review on any of our policies at all. We only have date completed on a portion of them, and many of them are left blank without a date even begun or reviewed. So if we don't do this, we are completely out of compliance, and we would have to bring hundreds of policies, or at least 100. I'll give you a minimum of 100 policies to date to put us in compliance of less than within the 2-year mark.
So,
And I know that we've all said, and it was said on the dais, that this project is in place where staff are working to get us better in compliance of all of our policies. So as a board, we have to make a decision. Either we're going to stick with this policy, come into compliance within a very short period of time, or we need to adjust this policy to be in compliance to then adjust it as we move forward with the complete project of reviewing all of our board policies.
so your concern is we don't have enough time left within the 2 years with the amount of policies that we have left to review and make sure that they're formally reviewed. Am I understanding that right? Within this policy, if we keep it as 2 years, you're concerned that the 2-year mark is coming up, and we have so many policies that haven't been reviewed, that with that time frame, we don't have enough time with the 2-year mark in here to finish completing reviewing all those policies.
It's past due.
Okay. So I guess my question is what I'm hearing it, and am I taking too much time? Because I can get back.
No,
to
no,
that
you
too.
can finish up,
Is
and
there-
then
is there anything
Karen,
else?
then Karen, and then myself.
You
No,
want me to
good.
get back in
No,
the
no,
queue?
no, no,
Okay,
finish your
sorry.
thought, no.
I don't want to monopolize the time. So when when all of these come and they've been reviewed and staff has been reviewed, you added as approved by the board. And what I hear you saying is we only have a few policy cycles left because as a board, you would want all of those policies reviewed. But if we don't change the cycle, those policies don't have to be approved by the board. They can just be approved by staff and reviewed by staff. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's my question, and I just need a point of clarification. So if we have an existing policy that we've had for, let's say, for 3 years, I have staff review it. Staff reviews it, sees there are no changes needed to that particular policy. Is it sufficient just for us on our end to say reviewed, March 2023 and be done at it, or is the board's expectation that once it's reviewed and no changes are made, it's just updated, say we reviewed it, put a date on it, is it the board's expectation that that policy then comes forward to you all, or is it okay that it's just reviewed, dated, because there are no changes, you all don't need to approve it? That's what I need some clarity on.
It's the decision of the board.
So if we don't have to approve it as the board, if we just give you the ability now to do that, then we're not as worried because it doesn't matter how many policy cycles we have. We just have to put a date of expectation to have staff do that by a certain time. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes, and that
Okay.
I would hold staff accountable to make sure that all of our policies are reviewed within that period of time. It helps us if we can just go through policy, add the date that it's reviewed, and if there are any changes to it, of course, those policy changes would come forward. However, if there are no changes to policy and it's just a date change that we reviewed it every 2 years, put the date on it, my understanding that we can just update it, and that since there are no changes, it would not need to come during that cycle if that's the board's wishes.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand all our options and get clarity on what the concern was and all of that. So I'll let everyone else talk and get back in the queue if I have more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vaughn. Member Perez?
That was going to be exactly my question, because there's been someone who has been reviewing the policies for the last year and a half. Am I correct? And they could have been putting, as they reviewed that policy, putting that date on there as they went through and reviewed that policy. How many policies to date does anyone know have been reviewed?
They're about halfway through the policies.
Halfway through the policies. So halfway through the policies, they could have been applying the date that policy had been reviewed.
There's been inconsistency throughout the years about dates added, dates not added. There used to be a company called Neola that provided the policies, and when I first became the school board attorney, the board was faced, to your point, Ms. Rendon, with dealing at one time 99 policies at one time because they hadn't done it for years. And so we've been trying to dig out from under that ever since, and it's a lot. And so there are a lot of moving pieces here. Ms. Rendon's point is well taken with that, and I think going forward, if we add dates of adoption and dates of review, you'll very shortly see it's starting to have a little more cohesion, and it's just been a function of a history of all over the place, quite frankly.
So that was the point that I was going to be making is, the date reviewed and then the date approved by the board. I mean, it would be, I think, a much easier process
Cleaner and
really
clearer.
Right. But that's just the point that I wanted to make.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Perez. Member Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a couple of thoughts in mind. Member Rendon, you're correct. We need to have a date, and we need to have the date and time, whatever, when it was approved, because we don't know. We go back to a policy, and then we say, somebody said, well, this was a policy. And then a parent may question, well, when did that policy come in? We don't have an answer. We need to have some answers for the parents and in the community when they want to know about a policy, because that's what we do. We make policies and procedures. Also, what I'm trying to maybe Attorney Porter, you can help me. Who came up with the 2 year? I mean, I think we may need more than 2 years. We could possibly need more than that.
We don't know because
We don't know, do we?
it was prior
That's
to
the point.
2013.
There's no date.
No date, no name.
It was prior to 2013, I can tell you that. So, yeah.
I was area superintendent then. I wasn't involved in that one now. But but so we need to, I think we might need it, because that's a lot of policies we are talking about. I mean, a hell of a lot of policies. And I think the superintendent, you and your staff and your cabinet could do those policies and bring them to the board. But make sure we have the date, the name, and so forth on there, so we stay within the compliance where it should be. Because those are a lot of policies. You know, and we as the board, we make policies and procedures, but you are the operation every day of the school. You and your staff and your cabinet is in the operational mode every day of the school system. So I think if you could look at them and bring them to us from that point, and then we could make some suggestions, because all those policies we may not need to know about. Because it's just like being a principal of high school, you make policies. I mean, some things you don't need to take to your faculty of staff. So that's my suggestion there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. And yeah, I think that the most important thing are some of the things, I know Kristen had started a year and a half ago with my intern, really starting to review the policies. And then from there, another intern came. So it's been reviewed. I think the dates are important. The only thing is for me is, it's hard for me to approve a policy that says adaptation of cycle of policies when I don't even know what that cycle looks like. So I would like to, it's like we're creating something without even looking at what the cycle looks like. I'd like to see what that cycle would look like and what that plan would look like before I approve it into a policy. So I think it's like we're getting the cart before the horse. Like I think we're putting a policy in place and it says there's an adaptation of cycle of policies. Well, what does that policy look like? I'm approving something that's 6 months, or is it a 3-year policy, or is it 4-year? So I personally would like to see what that cycle looks like before I approve the policy on it, if that makes any sense. And so,
I think the proposal, and we can.
Yeah.
That's why we're having this
Yeah.
discussion. If the board, the superintendent's recommendation, I think, is 3 times a year, and if the board likes that, we could put that into the policy.
yeah, I think there just needs to be more information, because if it not, it's not very as clear. It's just not as clear to me. Okay, thank you. Member Hahn, I think you were next. Jessica.
What is a realistic goal to getting compliance? Like, is it a year? Is it a year and a half? Like, what would it take? Like, what type of timeline are we looking at to have everything?
I think that we're going to get to that at part 3 of this workshop, but I think the project that the intern has been working on will go a long way to satisfying that requirement, and I think.
He hasn't been putting the dates on it.
No, but I think we would, once the board adopts it, we would put the dates on then, but it's related to this. So I think the goal was by the end of this year, but I don't know if, Kristen, if that's still realistic, or.
December 31st, or are we looking at spring? Or
I think realistically, probably
I'm
spring
not
at this point, yeah.
asking to be critical. I just want to
Right.
understand like where we are, because if we're going to take out the every 2 years, then do we revisit this policy once we're in compliance and put the 2 years back in? Or do we make it 5 years and then I mean,
I would not recommend that long of a
you're
runway.
recommending
Yeah.
taking it out and
For
then
now,
bringing it
and
back
then
in.
come back when it's appropriate. And I think honestly, by spring is probably realistic. I mean, it's not a hard goal, but I think that would make sense. And then we could revisit this policy at that time as well.
I don't, and for me, and I'm just speaking for myself, unless there's changes to the policy, it does not need to come, why are we going to approve something that hasn't been changed? I mean, I would think maybe updating us at the end of the year to say we're halfway there, or, we're further along, just kind of that touch point. So we have a sense of, how fast or how slow this is moving, because I know it can be tedious and, things come up that we don't expect that, take people away from that and move them to, so, it may shift a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this discussion. I think, giving the task and the direction from the board, as if having our departments and divisions go through our current policies, review them and date them is not a task that is impossible. I think we can move through it very quickly. I just wanted some clarity on what that looks like. In my opinion, like yours, Dr. Hahn, is if there are no changes to it, we can go through, have our departments review them, date them, have our cabinet look at them, and then we can update it online and be done and move forward, and then provide the board kind of updates, annually of kind of these are the ones that have been updated. So that would be no problem for staff to start looking through policy. I mean, we operate under these policies anyway. So if there were policies that needed to be changed, we would already have brought those forward. Because remember, board and staff can bring forward policy. If there were already policies that weren't correct, staff would have brought those forward and made changes. So I think majority of them, it's a simple review process, put a date, and I think staff can handle this pretty quickly.
And to Ms. Combs's point, and I agree, like, I don't like to look at things in, like, isolation, kind of big picture. So can we, I'd imagine, you're suggesting 3 times a year for the policy cycle. So would it be a fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer? Can we, I mean, just logically.
Kristen, what makes the most sense for her? But yeah, that's sort of what we were envisioning.
And so can we put that in here to give
We should put it in
more
there.
teeth?
Yes, no. I think that's the purpose of the workshop today. The language was sort of broad, but because we need to hear from you. This was proposed by one member. The conversation has been very
Maybe the board
helpful.
shall adopt an adaptation cycle of policies of no less than 3 times per
Well,
year.
I'll come up with the
something like
wording
that.
for that. I'll come
No
up.
less, because
Yeah.
maybe we have an emergency meeting and we have to have an extra one for something, but.
Got it.
I'd be even some more clarity just on, I mean, if we knew as a staff with our workshop calendar that it's going to be, in March, May, October, I mean, even being clear with the months when we're going to have those, so it holds us all accountable, including the board, I'd be up for that.
That would be very helpful, actually.
Put it down.
because yes, we'll put that in.
It helps us as board members too, when we want to bring policy forward, to know I have to start working on that, because it's,
Right.
otherwise it's kind of this moving
I
target.
think that'd be very helpful.
Catches up on you and you're like, oh, I didn't realize we were going to have a meeting next week or in 2 weeks, and, so then you have to wait to the next cycle.
I'll take the language of the thing of the workshop today, revise this, and get it to you well in advance of the public hearing, and you can always make changes. But the process is, this is what this workshop's about. We'll put more meat into it. We'll provide more clarity. Send it out to public hearing, and at that point, you can still modify it if we have to. But this is a very, very, very helpful conversation, board members.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you, Member Rendon.
Great. And yes, thank you. Great. And is there any other last comments? And then, so that way we can move on. Member Vaughn?
Thank you. First of all, thanks for caring about our policies so much and looking at those and bringing forward something to make sure that, we're being as succinct with them as we can be. I guess my closing thoughts were, if there's a policy that has 0 changes and we're just updating a date to make sure we reviewed it, to me, it's not imperative for board approval for that unless there's any changes. Just that's my thought on that. Whether we really remove the 2 years, because as you said, it sounds like we're already out of compliance and you're worried about that, and Member Rendon wants to just make sure we're not violating on any of our policies. It doesn't seem to be like there's a huge issue other than we're addressing it now, and we're going to come back with a policy that makes sure we're not in violation. But I appreciate this coming forth to make sure that our policies have been reviewed and we have a date and people can easily navigate that. I would say that as we talk about our policy cycle and we build that into adding it to our policy, I appreciate that it has to be in by a certain time, but like for me to get a policy with 1 week to review it, I can review it, but for some of them I like to get feedback from my constituents before I move forward on it, because it's not just about what I think, it's about what who I represent, what they think as well. And when I only have a week to review a policy that somebody's bringing forth, it doesn't really give me time to run that through different community members, run that through our employees, and get our feedback. So in that policy cycle, as we build it to have more structure in it, I would like to make sure that we have more than a week to review those policies that fellow board members have brought forward. So again, I can share that with members of my community and get feedback, because talking about the cell phone one, I have my own concerns, but I have a feeling that the community is going to have a lot more feedback on that as well. So that's my input into this whole conversation, and if that helps. Thank you.
Very helpful.
And one other is what we can do is I think our next policy workshop is December.
October 24th.
It's in October, okay. So what we can do is maybe as a practice from staff is we can just provide at the beginning of a policy workshop, we can say, we've had 52 of our policies have been reviewed and updated with a date of whatever, just at the beginning, so you guys are aware that we reviewed a certain number of policies, and then those policies wouldn't need to come before you because there weren't any changes to it, but we can at least communicate to you that we've had this number of policies that have been reviewed by staff and dates have been added accordingly.
I think that would be very helpful. And to your point, Member Vaughn, I think that would be a very helpful practice. Part of it, there has to be buy-in from this board on that. Because we have to. We've tried to establish hard submittal dates. They've never been honored, and then that everything starts to back up from there. So if we have buy-in about when you have to submit a policy, and that's a hard deadline, and we can't accept it after that deadline. But if we're doing 3 cycles a year, it shouldn't be as big of an issue for you. And then staff then would vet it internally, and then get it to you in enough times that you could have your constituents look at it as well. But that's got to be a collective buy-in with the board and with staff so that we can honor those deadlines, because it's not going to work if we get policies in late or we don't get it to you in time. So as long as everyone's on board with that, I think it would be very helpful to the process. But there has to be buy-in from everyone in this room to do that.
Can I make a comment about that? Turning on my mic because I know can't speak without my mic. For me, and I can't speak for my fellow board members, what would be helpful is to engage our secretaries and have reminders similarly where Becky always gives us reminders about, okay, you have 5 days until, you have to pull down consent agenda items. I think my struggle has been we kind of get an email with a date, and then maybe that date's added to the calendar, and then a lot of things come up before then. So having, reminders, and I know that's work for other people, but as board members, we have a lot on our calendar and a lot changing. So, if we have first a month reminder, and then we have a 2-week reminder, and then we have maybe a 3-day reminder, and our secretaries have that on our calendar in a certain color, that just helps us stay focused on the fact that that is coming through. I think it would be easier to make sure we're hitting those deadlines for me personally. Thank you.
I think it'll help us too, just to have some structure for staff. It would really help just to have dates that we're going to have these policy work. We're going to have them in this month, this month, and this month, and we just stick to it and hold to that. That'll help us. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Member Rendon, you wanted to say anything?
Yeah, I want to make sure that, Mr. Porter, if you're going to go ahead and revise some of the language in here, I think we all need to make note that the very first sentence here is that we have given through this policy the direction to the staff to be able to review policies and bring them to us as necessary. I also want to make sure that we don't discount all the work that has been done for the last 18 months. Former chief of staff has been working very closely with Kristen. We've had 2 interns working it. It's not without note that they have done a tremendous amount of work. We have a lot of duplication in our policies. We have a lot of policies that are out to date in the language because we don't know when they were last looked at. And so it's taken them a lot of time to put that in place. And so I don't want anyone to feel that bringing this before the board is because of the lack of work that they have done. They have done a tremendous amount of work, but we have a responsibility as a board to be in compliance of our own policies. because we need to make sure as a public that we are showing we're in compliance, which is why I brought this to the board. Also, may we also make note, Mr. Porter, that if you're going to revise this, to please make a note that for next spring, we have a review date of March. Is that when we're doing, if we're on a cycle, are we August, October, March?
Yeah, yes, I would say so. We'll look at usually when the workshop dates come out, and then we can put something.
So then we make sure that we have that on that spring, because if we're going to say that this work has been done by then, we want to bring this back to make sure that we align however we want to run a policy cycle with the completion of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Member Rendon, for bringing that. And thank you, board members, for looking at all that. And I will say, I would like to concur with Member Vaughn. If we can push it back like 2 weeks, if we had that policy cycle for 3 weeks, like if I had the binder for 3 weeks instead of a week, if we can push everything back at least 2 weeks, that would give us at least 3 weeks to be able to engage with our community a little bit more and look at those policies. So I think it would be as simple just pulling back 2 weeks at least. Okay, well, thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll look for that language. We'll go ahead and move on to the next policy. Mr. Porter?
So the next policy was initiated by members Perez, member Gray, and member Combs, and this is to revise your existing cell phone policy. So there's a wireless communication policy that's found in policy 5136, and you can see that in front of you. The portion that has been struck through was your existing policy. The board members that sponsored this asked that we look at the policy adopted by Pasco County. So we took the language that Pasco County adopted and put it into the existing policy and revised it. The existing policy said similar things. That the Pasco County policy goes into a little more detail with a little more specificity, and you can see what it says, and it's if Member Perez and Member Combs want to talk about it, we can. You should also hear from staff about this and from the superintendent, because one of the issues always with a policy like this is enforcement and making sure that we don't create an undue burden for the school sites. And so I know the chief of schools is here. I know the superintendent probably wants to speak to it, and then the board can discuss how you want to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I know we have our chief of schools, Sue Burkett, here to talk about it before we move forward.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to hear from her.
I think it would be helpful to hear your perspective, you and our superintendent's perspective, before we discuss this.
Go ahead, Sue. Go ahead.
So the policy that's being proposed doesn't look a whole lot different than what is already in existence. In a nutshell, elementary is to put it away during the school day. Middle school may be allowed to use it during lunchtime, and high school may be allowed to use it during change of class and lunchrooms time. You do put a clause in there that a principal has the ability to make a more restrictive policy if they work with their region superintendent for any concerns that they may have. Some schools now have a more restrictive policy than that and would have concerns loosening it up, but you do give them the opportunity to make that decision at a site-by-site basis. So it doesn't look a whole lot different than the way it is implemented in schools now.
Was there a language or something that you needed to change? Any language on there?
No, you have assistant superintendent that just needs to change to region superintendent, but the language that is in here does give flexibility in the way it is implemented within a school. And I think that's important. We don't want to put more on teachers, and we don't want to create an environment where there's a confrontation that's unnecessarily had, or that we remove kids from the classroom instruction because of the cell phone. So I do think it does give opportunity for sites to do what's in the best interest of their community and their population.
Thank you, Ms. Burkett. Superintendent Ayers?
I'm fine. I want to hear from our board.
I know Karen went.
Okay, we'll start. Go ahead, Member Perez.
Thank you. With my cyber task force, we talked about the issues with our students and their wireless devices. The fact that this gives some freedom for those instructional activity, and that continues in the classrooms, is a plus. But also, we talk about the issues of the grades in the reading and the math. that we need to really focus on. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this forward, is because we need to kind of do a reset with our students this year, mainly to really get them refocused in their reading and math, and kind of give them that leg up and assist them. And I think this would help, and also with the issues of bullying in our schools, seeing if we could get them, our students refocused on conversations in the classroom, conversations in the lunchroom, and get that connection again with their fellow students in the schools again.
Thank you, Member Perez. Member Vaughn?
Thank you. First of all, I do appreciate this coming forward. I do think that we need to revisit our cell phone devices. When we talk about books in comparison to disturbing things that are airdropped or shared within cell phones, or things that I've personally seen or heard, it's quite concerning because there's very little control over it. However, I do have some concerns with the policies in how intensive it is and how it's been worded. I hear Ms. Burkett saying that we already have policies like this. I would like something added, like especially the pre-K through 5, because unless you're arranging some kind of ride or communicating after school, it really gives elementary students like zero access to communicate with home if they need through a cell phone. So I don't know if there's something that could be added, or as needed, for emergencies, or with, specific parental, with parental consent, maybe one time a day to check in. I think that there are a lot of parents that use that as a main way to communicate with their children, and also feel that if there was an emergency, there is some sort of safety where they could communicate with their children, and having it in a box that someone might have to access in case of emergency makes me, as a parent of an elementary student, feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I would like to see a little more flexibility of some access in some way in elementary school if needed. Also, I have concerns with 62 through 73, where it really talks about not being able to use it to record anything at any time ever, basically saying that's an invasion of privacy. While I understand that it could be looked at that way, and we should maybe have some wording to protect the privacy, because obviously not everybody gives their consent to be recorded at all times. I do worry that there have been things that have come through where maybe teachers have acted inappropriately, or there has been a concern with, something where the only way to prove that is with a video recording that the students have been able to take, and that allows us to see what's actually happening in the classroom if there's some concerns of handling something incorrectly, or God forbid any kind of abuse. And so I don't like the fact that a student isn't able to, if they feel a teacher's being inappropriate in some way, or not able to capture it at all in any way, and if they do, that they're going to be penalized. So I don't know if there's a way to rework that or look at that. I don't like that part of the policy. And then finally, I'm not sure about 125 through, I guess, 127. A person who discovers a student using it in violation is required to report the violation to the building principal. To me, encouraging, what was that? Encouraging students or someone else to kind of tell on each other and become kind of this, police force of reporting each other mandatorily, to me, is too harsh. If you're using improperly and a teacher or someone catches you and they want to go ahead and discipline you, I think that's fine. But to have a policy mandating that if somebody sees you, that they're going to be in trouble if they don't report you, seems too much to me. So those are my feedback. I think it's great that we start with this. To me, copying Pasco's is a big jump, and it's a little bit too much in the other direction. So, in order for me to support this going forward, there are some changes I'd like to see about that. And that's my feedback on the policy is. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vaughn. Member Hahn?
Thank you, Member Combs. I'm going to go to line 71. And I appreciate you bringing this forward. I think there definitely, with all the concerns, needs to be an update around this policy. So 71, it says here, if the phone is confiscated, held to the end of the day until a parent picks it up, the student may be directed to delete the audio and/or picture video file while the parent or guardian is present. I mean, I just want it to be clear that certainly a school administrator can insist that, but the student is really under no legal obligation to do so. So that needs to be made clear so that, you know, yeah, you can insist they do it. You can even demand they do it, but legally they don't have to. And so, you know, somehow, you know, I don't want to start like, you know, infringing on people's Fourth Amendment's protections under the Constitution. So I would like something to be added there that states that, you know, they're under no legal obligation to do that, because I don't want a principal to be, might be very forceful, or a teacher to be very forceful about that, and the student and even the parent be intimidated and not understand their legal protections under the Constitution. So, you know, that's, I'm concerned there. I don't want a lawsuit, is my point. And then under 72, okay, that was Guardian, where it's, I'm sorry, 73, confiscated, if the violation involves potentially illegal activity, the confiscated WCD may be turned over to law enforcement. Shouldn't it be will be? I mean, if it's illegal activity.
I think we can look at that. We wanted to give as much flexibility to the administrator as possible.
Okay, but if it's illegal, they don't really have a choice, is my point. There should be, if it's illegal, there's no choice. You're turning it over. And that leads me to sexting. It says here, such conduct will be subject to discipline and possible confiscation and referral to law enforcement. Shouldn't it always be subject to law enforcement? Sexting is illegal. Like, that's not open for, like, debate. It's illegal to share sexual photos with a minor. So, again, it should be always subject to law enforcement. We don't get to play police here, you know. I mean, to me, that's a big issue, especially in middle and high schools. And there should be some training at the beginning of the year, or something in the student code of conduct that clearly explains, and then students sign that they understand. You know, just so because it's a conversation you constantly have to have with teenagers. Something, you know, very innocent becomes very serious quickly. Sorry. 89. Students shall have no expectation of confidentiality with respect to their WCD on school premises. Again, Mr. Porter, I'm going to go to your expertise on this in the Fourth Amendment. You know, you can say there's no expectation, but the U.S. Constitution says there is an expectation of confidentiality. So how do we walk that line?
Yeah, students when they're on school grounds and in school property or in school time do not have the same constitutional rights as other people have outside of school. So that's
but they do, and
they don't have the same.
Unless there's a strong reason.
The line that, as written, is legally defensible. I mean, it's strong language, but under the Constitution, that's acceptable. If the board is uncomfortable with that, we could certainly change it. But from a legal standpoint, that's a defensible statement.
Right. This is where I get concerned, is that, you know, somebody grabs it, you know, is frustrated, takes a child's phone and starts looking through it because they think something happened. And I just think there has to be some level of confidentiality where, you know, students don't feel like their phone could be taken and just randomly looked through. I mean, where is there a process for doing that?
I think that goes more to training for staff and
But shouldn't there be some type of process on, like, because this is what I'm afraid of, just a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Someone takes a phone, looks through it, and then, you know, there is confidential things on that phone that a teacher or a principal should not have access to.
As if it's something as related to school activity and it's on the phone, there is no expectation of confidentiality. If it's something private, then I think that does go back to the training of how the staff deals with that. and how they use that information. How does that happen, Sue, or what's?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So no administrator or building personnel can just randomly search students. There has to be reasonable suspicion in order for them to search a student, to look at their cell phone, to look in their backpack or any of that. And that is training that all administrators go through.
And is
So,
there some type of guideline that says under these conditions, or?
yeah, there are guidelines and it's pretty specific, and if they're ever unsure, they always know to make a call and work through Chief Newman, or even they have in times called our legal team to make sure that if we're doing something, we're doing it under the proper protocol.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just don't want us to be opening ourselves up to lawsuits.
Well, I think that's always a good concern. I think and I think the other comments are well taken. This particular one, though, is completely, it's
Right,
defensible.
and we have a lot of substitute teachers in our schools that may not have gone through this type of training, so maybe that's a whole other conversation on, what type of PD are we providing to long-term subs and so forth.
So if I can just jump in, sorry to interrupt you. We typically encourage administrators to be the only one that confiscates cell phones. We don't want teachers to be in that situation. We don't want teachers to take a phone and then it goes missing and we're responsible. So it is highly encouraged by all schools at all levels that administrators are the ones that deal with any cell phone concerns.
Be helpful, and this is a question, and I shouldn't ask if I don't know the answer to it. Would it be helpful to make that clear in the policy, Ms. Burkett, that it should only be administrators? Would that
Yeah.
help you or hinder you?
Any language that you put in the policy is really obviously your decision on how you word it. We'll work through the implementation of it. I don't think it hinders it. I think the use of there are some teachers that I would not want to take away the ability if they're used in a different capacity. So I don't want to tie our hands with specific language. The ability to keep it based on a school situation helps. We have been very fortunate and haven't run into any of the circumstances that you're concerned about. The same thing with the sexting, right? It does say potentially illegal activity, right? If it is illegal activity, 100% law enforcement will be involved, and they will take it from there. So I know the language is important, but I also want to make sure we aren't handcuffing schools by the language.
Okay. And then on line 91, where it talks about any way that it will reasonably create in the mind of another person an impression of being threatened, humiliated, harassed. So talk to me a little bit about how that plays out in real time, because different people have varying levels of sensitivity and tolerance, and what seems harmless to one person might be perceived differently by another, especially in the times we're living in. There's a lot of hypersensitivity. So how are we managing that in real time?
Same way we're doing it now with or without the policy, right? Bullying, harassment, social media, all of that has been going on, and schools have been dealing with that on a case-to-case basis. Most schools are going to do some sort of restorative practice. If there's any kind of bullying or threatening or intimidation that's going on, they will use their professional judgment in a mediation, in notifying parents so that parents are involved, giving warnings. But those are life lessons that we value to be important conversations that need to be had with not only the students, but with their parents, so that they can help us and be aware of what they're monitoring outside of the school day.
Thank you. And just lastly, on the last page, how does this align with our student code of conduct? Because, I don't think there's I understand that it's school by school, but in order to kind of safeguard all students around equity and equitable process and procedure and discipline process, there's not much in our student code of conduct that really puts teeth into this policy. And I just don't want to have a policy to check a box. So when some of this is, what is the disciplinary steps? It's kind of like what we just talked about and Member Combs mentioned with the last policy. Well, there was no teeth in that. We didn't know what the policy cycle was. So where was the alignment? We don't want to look at this in isolation. I looked at the student code of conduct last night, and there's not a lot in here that really addresses discipline. So you may have kids, look, if you look at our discipline data now, it shows that kids, minority students, are being disciplined at a much higher level than other students. So, where is it in the student code of conduct so we make sure that students are treated fairly across the board, and that one high school might be super strict or one middle school and then another isn't, and then you have parents saying, well, my son did that at his middle school and he was suspended for a week, but her son, just had his phone taken away. So how do we guarantee that, certain students or schools are not more heavy-handed, or, where is that in the student code of conduct?
So it is addressed in certain places within the code of conduct, whether it's coded as disobedience for continuously using a phone when you shouldn't be, or whether or not it's the social media disruption. There are guidelines within our code of conduct that address behavioral concerns when a student doesn't follow the procedures or policies in a school. They are somewhat vague because we do need to leave it up to a school based on their policies of how they do it. To answer your question about how we're making sure we're consistent, it is definitely already a conversation that has been had with region superintendents. Josh Crystal and I are working together and how we get in a little bit more proactively into schools to work through some of those things. But we have to pay attention to the equity of our discipline across the board, not just with cell phones, but with all of our disruptions. And it is a focus. That data will be looked at on a regular basis with region superintendents and principals, so that we're having those discussions and they're at the forefront. We do have to do things differently, and those plans are already in place to address that.
I'm glad to hear that. I guess you'll make some of these updates, and and then you'll bring it back and we can review it. Okay, thank you. Thank you again to the 3 board members. I guess, I know Member Combs and Member Perez have been talked an awful lot, been very committed to this. I appreciate that. And you've talked a lot about the airdropping issue, and, I don't have an iPhone. I don't even know what that is, but, so I'd like to hear from them when they're comfortable talking about how they feel this addresses those concerns. Because if students are having access at lunchtime and there's airdropping, how do we have a policy that really gets to that issue? Because I know you're very passionate about that, and you have a task force on it, and so I appreciate your comments around that, so I can help better understand how this kind of addresses your concerns.
Thank you, Member Hahn. Member Washington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tell you, this has been a concern in Hillsborough County for years, even when I was an administrator. Cell phones are really hard to control. I mean, it's really difficult to do. And I've sat in meetings where we had parents sued by attorneys. Attorneys sued the school because cell phones were taken away and lost and so forth. You had to pay for them. I remember one time a teacher she confiscated a cell phone, and somebody stole the cell phone out of a desk drawer. She had to pay for the cell phone. She had to pay for it because it was her responsibility, because she was the person that took the phone away. So I like to go to item. This is nothing new we are talking about now. It's been in for a long time. We have always had difficulty with cell phones and other electronic devices. Item 34, and I've always been a principal. Even though I was tough as a principal, but I also looked at the whole outlook, how we don't want to try to catch kids. That's the main thing. My concern. If we see you doing something, then we have you. But we're not out there trying to look and catch you. Item 34, I don't particularly agree with this. They say out of the view for the entire school day. So if somebody sees a cell phone, if you got a cell phone in your hand, it's not out of view. But it doesn't mean you're using a cell phone. And then it's kind of hard for a kid because we use our cell phone when we're not supposed to be using them. I mean, let's face the facts, we do. So you don't want a kid to use the cell phone no time, but at lunch you let the kid use the cell phone. Now you're defeated its purpose because it's not out of view. So we have to look at a lot of times how we word this. I think out of view for the entire day. So what happens if it's in view? What's the consequence? And I know, Chief, you have. I mean, I'm just saying as a person. So I don't particularly like that out of view for the entire day. But then lunchtime, you let them use the phone. And then we go down to high school completely out of view for the entire day, except students' lunch. How about if a kid going to lunch, going down the hallway? So I think we might need to reword that a little bit. I really do, Mr. Porter, because it makes it like you're contradicting yourself. Because I can see parents come in and say, well, he was on his way going to lunch. He was about to go in the cafeteria. But he said out of view until you're at lunch. And believe me, if you have not been administrator, you don't understand how parents are. Moving to 120, I think that's 125. It said a person who discovers a student using a phone in violation of this policy is required to report the violation to the building principal. A person, who, what person? Is this a person just walking around at the school, or is it a student? You know, I think we need to be specific when we say that, a person. So I could be I could be a parent or a person coming on the campus and say, you know what, I saw a kid around there, he had on a red shirt, and he was using his cell phone. So we have to be particular because it say using any type of electronic device, a person. So could we change and be more specific rather than a person? Because I can see where there could be a neighborhood parent coming in and don't like this kid and say, well, he had a phone. And that do happen, people. It does happen many a times. And then it goes down to 120. It says students are personally and solely responsible for the care and security of their phone or devices. The board assumes no responsibility for theft, loss, damage to, or misuse. Then it's still kind of bad because if I take your phone and I put it in a place that, well, you can't have your phone until the parent come at 3 o'clock and somebody steals the phone. This happened before. They stole the phone. They stole the phone out of my office. I had it on the desk. They stole the phone out of my office when I was a principal. And the parent came in, and I was looking for the phone. I couldn't find the phone, so I ended up myself paying for the phone. So, you know, we have to be very particular. Is this within the rules? Is this within the law? That's what we have to look at. If we take something from somebody and we lose it, how is that with the law, Mr. Porter? So, Madam Chair, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Rendon?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of changes when it comes to electronic devices and the, recent laws that are passed with House Bill 379. And one of the things I'm very excited about with this is that we really focus back on the teachers and the staff at the schools. It gives them the authority to be able to control their classrooms, control their school. And that's really important. But what I do want to make sure that we are taking consideration is line 5 through 7. I think because one of our largest amount of electronic devices are phones. As an example, I think we should put phones in there. I think leaving it out is just way too broad. I know that we only use it as examples, but I think it is probably one of the most used items, so we should use it as an example. Lines 18 through 20, I'm a little concerned, and I look at lines 18 through 20 and then compare that to lines 62 through 73. I'm a little concerned when they're out on field trips or after school activities, there's not a student out there that is not recording a program, that is not recording an athletic event, that is not recording a performance. And according to this policy, we are now prohibiting less unless we put it in writing they can. And I think that's a little extreme when it comes to after-school activities or after-school activities, field trips, those types of things. I think we need to have a policy that specifically gives permission to do that when we're somewhere. And at discretion of the teacher, that's fine when it's on a field trip. But after-school events, we're going to be a little bit part of that. I also think that we, in line 89 through 92, we do say students may not use the WCD in any way that might reasonably create in the mind of another person an impression or being threatened, humiliated, harassed, embarrassed, or intimidated. I'm not sure we need that and the definition from our previous policy of policy 5517, because when reviewing policy 5517, it is very detailed on what bullying is, what threat is, what harassed is. We've done a very good job of that. So if we're going to refer to it, I don't need to know if we need that previous line, because when we put the previous line and put might reasonably, that takes away from our definitions we've already defined. We bring question to it, in my opinion.
Can I hit pause for a second? That's a very good point. So is your recommendation that we take out the policy reference, or
No.
we keep the policy reference in and take out the other language?
The policy reference actually gives a definition
Okay,
of
so-
what harassment,
Got it.
threatening, or bullying would be. But when we leave in the previous line of might reasonably, we diminish the policy of 5517. We've done a good job in defining that. If we leave the previous line in there, we've taken away and we bring question.
Thank you.
And that would be a concern of mine in doing that. Let me back up a little bit, my apologies. From line 29 through 45, if we are going to eliminate the use of electronic devices all day, not in sight, are we then committing to having other electronic devices that meet the needs of the teachers when they are having certain curriculums on an electronic device? I look at something as basic as Kahoots, right? Many teachers use that as a game within the class of knowledge. I don't have a problem with our students not using their cell phones for that, but then are we prepared to make sure we're providing that device within classrooms?
It does say that classroom teachers may also provide, the student may utilize a cell phone during classroom activities. So it does give the teacher the opportunity to allow students to use their phone for such things like Kahoot, even if they've earned time within the classroom and they want to check their phone. To Member Vaughn's point, it does allow that classroom teacher to have the parameters to do such activities.
Okay, was that for pre-K through 5? I'm not seeing that in pre.
No, and you may want to add that in there in pre-K through 5 to give that teacher that ability to do that, especially in your intermediate 3 through 5 grades, where they are using the cell phones for instructional use.
I mean, let me make it very clear. In the process of creating this bill, it's very important to recognize that a lot of medical research went into the creation of House Bill 379. It was a lot about our medical impacts of digital devices on the development of children and the development of children's brains. So I do appreciate the bill and where it came from and the purpose of it. I just want to make sure our policies are going to be aligned with giving flexibility to our teachers and our administrators. I also think that if we're going to make it, right now the law states that both a teacher and administrator have the ability to remove or take away a device. So I don't know if we want to align our policy with the law. It's a little dicey in that, but I also believe that it also protects the teacher if we do that, and maybe making it a policy that if a teacher is going to do that, they want to bring in an administrator to assist with them or what have you. So I think we need to consider that, because the law does allow the teacher to have that ability to remove a device if necessary. So I do want to make sure. And then the last thing I do want to make sure that I want to make sure that we're going to do something when we pass this policy that is not just going to be posting it. We need to make sure parents are aware of this new policy. It is very detailed. We may need to make it very clear. They need some sign of sign off or something that a parent has reviewed it for all minor children, because we are dramatically taking a large change in our cell phone usages within our schools. And it's going to be a shift. To Member Vaughn's point, I personally can speak on my behalf. There are times where I text my kid and say I'm picking them up. That is going to be a mindset that I've got to go backwards to their elementary days when I had to call the office and say, please make sure my child knows not to go to the bus but go to Carline, because my children didn't have a cell phone until they were in 6th and 7th grade. And so I'm going to have to go back to a mindset. My communication is going to be adults and not with my child. So I think it's very important that we know that we're going to go backwards, and not in a bad way, but go back to old school where we're going to have to communicate much more with administrators of our change of what's happening with our kids during the day, because we've gotten into a habit of letting our students know and not letting our administration know. So, and that is a good thing, to be honest with you, making sure that our administrators knows what should be, because I've had problems, and it's my fault, where they directed my kid to a bus and I was picking them up and my kid's like, no, my mom's picking me up. So I think it's important that we recognize what this shift does to that policy and what that change is. I also think we also recognize, and we need to revisit, making sure we're informing our families of our emergency procedures in an emergency situation in our schools. Making sure parents know that those devices have to be on silent, because if there is a true emergency in our schools, we don't want to bring attention to where our students are. And so we need to make sure we remind our parents of our emergency procedures at the same time we're sending this procedure out, because that is going to be one of the first things parents are concerned about. How can I get a hold of my kid during an emergency? That's the last time we need to get a hold of our kid, because we don't want to bring attention to where that child is. And so I think we need to make sure they understand our procedures during an emergency so they recognize the safety of their children. So I want to make sure we do that at the same time.
Okay, go ahead. Are you finished? I'm sorry. Did you have any comments? I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't think there's going to be a complete agreement today on this. I think there's a lot of wording, there's a lot of comments, there's a lot of opinions on this, and I don't think this is going to be an absolute today. And it's 11:11, and I think we could probably all go around. I think everyone, except I haven't had a chance to speak on behalf of this. I think everyone has had a chance. I think we're going to have to take a lot more time on this. I do like the direction of the beginning as far as elementary. I understand some people, having elementary students, what that looks like, but I will say I'm seeing earlier and earlier where you're seeing 8, 9, 10-month-olds with tablets. You're seeing, I'm seeing babies, moms holding to babies and stuff like that. We are seeing this everywhere, and it is getting much worse. And I will say, for me, as someone who has an older child, to me, earbuds are a huge problem. The earbuds at school, I'm seeing kids walking around with earbuds, watching shows on TV. It is getting out of control. When I think about the amount of airdropping, the sexting, the bullying, the discipline, the cheating, the drugs, the destruction of properties, the cell phones are a huge issue. But I know I'm not a principal of a school. I think we need to dig down deep and really get information from the teachers, get information from the principals, get information from community, parents, get some feedback, because this is doable. I mean, you look at Adams Middle School. They have a 0 cell phone policy, and nobody has cell phones there. And you can walk through the school, and what you're seeing a lot of disciplinary reduction of problems in the school, big reductions. So I think it is a hard thing to tackle, but the gains would be huge. The amount of bullying that happens alone. I mean, I can talk to Pansy and the list of issues that she has that come with problems in our district. Probably 85% of them are related to cell phones, and that includes multiple things. I think as a society, we've gotten so used to using cell phones, even teachers and everybody else, it's just become part of that. But it does happen. At Walker Middle School, there's no cell phone at lunches, and guess what? Children are talking to each other. Okay, kids are happier, discipline problems are less. So it is something that we can tackle and we must tackle. I mean, you look at Jesuit, Berkeley, you look at any private school, those schools are tackling it. You look at jails, you look at different high-risk programs, they're tackling without cell phones. It's not that we can't tackle it, it's just that we have to be maybe more methodical about it and really engage all the stakeholders without passing something like this. I don't want to tell a principal what to do when I'm not there day to day, but we need to have more teeth. And I think this is a beginning, but there's also no discipline issues or things like that. And as far as theft, there are pockets where you can put cell phones that are very minimally priced where a child can fingerprint it and take it out. So there are things that we can avoid as far as when we talk of theft. We just can't be scared to not talk about getting these phones out of the schools and how do we control them more. And if you ask most teachers in high school, they would tell you the earbuds are the biggest problem right now. You have kids walking around school like they're at a mall. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have kids who are cheating, who are planning skipping, who are just all kinds of things that are happening. So we've got to look at this, and maybe this is just the beginning. And the elementary, that's the expectation, because you're seeing more and more younger kids having phones. So I think this is something that we're going to have to talk longer, deeper about, but this is at least a start. Yes, and okay. Jessica, Member Vaughn, sorry.
Thank you. So I just have a few points after listening to my fellow board members. One, I'm a little confused about the definition of sexting, because twice it talks about images being shared, and I agree with Dr. Hahn that when images are shared, it becomes a legality. But at one part, it just talks about, before it goes into, on 96, it talks about transmittal, threatening, obscene, and then it talks about how engaging in sexting, sending, receiving, sharing, viewing, or possessing pictures, text message, or emails, or other materials of sexual nature. So are we including sexting as just pictures, or are we talking about sexting as anything that's sexual in nature in general? Because that's a difference in legality when we're talking about that. So I would like a clear definition of what we're considering sexting. Also, I'm a little bit confused when we talk about amendment rights, because we do have policies and procedures where at any time we can search kids' backpacks and there's no right to privacy. They're random searches so that they can't be seen. We've talked about it with Chief Newman and Superintendent Davis. So I would like to know like what allows us to do that and how that might be different from searching phones and what that looks like. So as we talk about legally, I understand the difference. Also, what I hear a lot when we talk about this are concerns about airdrops or concerns about earpods, and there's nothing in here that specifically addresses that. So as we move forward, maybe we can put more of those in, like airdrop can only be done with teacher's permission if it's pertinent to the class, because there might be a time where a student has something where they've taken a note or they've done something and they want it to be shared. So as long as it's done with permission of the teacher or at response of the teacher, that might be an option. But I do think we need to specifically say that airdropping to classmates, without permission is not allowed. Also, if we have a certain concern with AirPods, then I think we need to be more specific about what those concerns are and where we can use them and what that looks like. I know that's going to be a challenge with a lot of students. I like that we put in here that if there's an IEP or a 504, we can reconsider that, because there are neurodiverse students that use that more for sensory issues than not paying attention. So I do think we need to be sensitive about that, but I do think we need to define something more about AirPods specifically and the things that we're concerned about. So I do think it is a good start. I don't get the sense that any board member is uncomfortable with moving forward and putting more restrictions on, so I think that's good. I just think we need to agree more on what that looks like, and we do understand that anything we put in place can be amended as it goes back to the schools. I know that there has been talk about, well, what's the discipline on this? I mean, it does say that if there are repeated offenses, we can just not allow the student to bring the phone to school in general. And I know we often talk about not getting too much in the weeds about policy direction and then allowing the superintendent to kind of implement that. So I'd like to see what comes forward with that, because it is important that we are implementing this, but at the same time, it gives the superintendent an opportunity to show us how he implements our policies. So those are my thoughts, just wrapping it up. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Member Rendon had another question?
Sorry, I just have one question. If we're going to not revise it now, and we're going to revise and bring it back. If we don't have our next policy cycle till October, I think that's just too long. I mean, that's where my concern comes in. If we're only bringing policies back 3 times a year, if we don't bring them back in October, we're going to bring them back in March. So we've got 2 very important policies that we really need to address fairly quickly. How are we going to work that?
So, that's a good point. So, I mean, you have an existing cell phone policy that, as Ms. Barquette said at the very beginning, is very similar to what we've done. The proposed policy goes into way more detail and does a much deeper dive. But you already have if you look at lines 13 through 27, that's your existing policy, and it's not a bad policy at all. It just it's very short. So if that is in effect right now within our schools, and so you all have provided a lot of great information today, and I think Ms. Burkett and I need to go back, and I've taken notes on it, and then it does need to be sort of we need to bring in principals and we need to bring in administrators with the schools. So I think it's worthwhile doing it, but you're not going to be left without a policy in place if it's not adopted now, because you've got language already that sort of allows administrators to address the issue. So I think or we could come back at the public hearing with incremental changes and sort of take in the notes we have today, and if there's consensus that you want to adopt it, we could do that now. Those are the 2 main options. Keep the existing policy as is, which does give the administrators and schools the ability to address the issue, or we could try to come together and with some things that you all could reach consensus on and adopt that at this point, and then continue to workshop it. So those are the 2 real options.
My only concern with that is that as it stands right now, we don't protect our teachers. We protect our administrators, but according to the law, the teachers now have the authority to remove a device from a student. And so my only concern is that we are not, with this current policy, protecting the ability of a teacher to remove a device. If they do, we don't have the policy to back it up.
Well, it's also not been that's not been the way the district has operated from a procedure standpoint, and that's to protect teachers. And I think Ms. Burkett can talk about that a little bit more, but I don't know that the schools or the district wants the teachers to have to assume that responsibility at this point without further guidance.
But the law states that we are authorizing teachers and other instructional personnel to designate an area for wireless communication during instructional time.
But the
So
law
my
allows-
concern is that we as a district aren't giving that authority for them to do that.
The law doesn't require that we give that authority. If we want to do that, we can. So we're not going to be out of compliance with the law. And again, I think we'd have to hear from the superintendent and our staff about whether that's really helping teachers or hurting teachers. But you can decide how you want to do it. Board members, I'll just say it's 11:23. You've gotten through 1.5 policies. I think Ms. Perez and Mr. Washington want to speak, and then I think the superintendent needs to wrap this up, and we need to decide how you want to proceed. So
We can go, Ms. Perez.
Okay. Yeah, if we can go briefly through, because I think this is something that we're going to obviously maybe need a whole workshop for, or more time to engage on that. Ms. Perez?
Just for the public, when did House Bill 379 come out?
It was introduced this legislative session, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Member Washington, did you have any questions?
Only one simple answer, and Sue, you can help me on this. I think the principal is going to need to know their community for all these policies to work. Because I don't care how many policies we write down or what we do. If you live in a certain community, it's not going to fly. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we do. I know we need to engage a lot of members, and this is going to be something that's going to take a while. I think we have some good clarity for the first policy that we know, but I think the second policy is something we've talked about since the day I got here. It's probably one of the things that I think is probably the most important thing in our society right now, and so I think it's going to take a while to unfold this. Superintendent Ayers?
Appreciate this discussion. I mean, as we look forward for workshops, I mean, this provides direction to myself and my staff, so I appreciate the discussion this morning. As I look at this policy, I mean, it gets pretty deep. So we you guys develop policy and we develop the procedures behind that. So as we look at this policy, the way it's written, it gets pretty procedural, things that we can do as a staff procedurally. So I just wanted to kind of make that statement that you guys developed the policy, we developed the procedures behind that to implement that policy. But I just, as we move forward with cell phones, they're bringing cell phones the first day of the school coming up. Our whole goal, we have student huddles that start at the beginning of the year. It comes down to educating our students so that they know what those rules are. All of our schools do that. But our focus moving forward is to really minimize loss of instructional time. So we don't want to, create situations in schools where we're catching kids, like Mr. Washington said. We've really got to do a better job this year of minimizing loss of instructional time, and we're going to do that. So I just appreciate the discussion this morning and providing direction to us.
Okay. Thank you, board members. And now we'll move on to our third policy. Okay.
Thank
Yes. 7540.01. Okay, and this will be from Dr. Weeks.
Thank you, Chair Combs. Real quick, I was
Oh,
going to
yeah,
jump in.
you go ahead.
Yes, just let you know that the next 4 policies will be highlighted by Mr. Weeks. And these 4 policies do some aligning of standards in our IT policies, as well as aligning with House Bill 379, Senate Bill 256, and Senate Bill 662, all of which are some form of online protection, privacy, and technology standards. So, Dr. Weeks.
Good morning, board members. The first policy that I have in front of us is 7540.01, which is the use of technology. This policy primarily was wordsmithed just to understand that our digital ecosystem has grown considerably within the district. Previously, we talked about items such as voicemail and email. However, we continue to expand the digital ecosystem, including items such as Teams. We have applications such as Canvas, which include communications. So we just wanted to make sure that we had included all of those components and trying to think more of how we expand this in the future and be more inclusive so that we're covered under the policy. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Weeks. We'll be reviewing those 4 policies all together. I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments. Anybody? Okay, anybody? Okay. Member Rendon?
Sorry.
And you can just look at me since Mr. Porter's not here. Direct your.
Obviously, I've looked over these bills quite a bit when it comes to it, and again, the intent of these bills and the work that went behind them really focused on the development of a child. It was critical on where a child has come from and the frequency and the use of electronic devices so early on. Second of all, the protection of our children, whether it's through elementary school or into high school, and the use of these devices and the use of things that we're looking at. I believe, and there's multiple of them that reflected of one. So make sure I'm correct on this. We within our own district have products, for example, Gaggle, that we approve to be able to be monitoring some of the work of the students, looking out for the protection of the students, not to be violation of privacy of what they're doing, but for protection of that. I don't remember seeing any piece of this that states that we're going to have certain technologies that are going to be doing that or looking in that part. Did I miss that when I was reviewing it? I know there was a lot of information.
Yes, ma'am. And I believe that's actually covered under policy 7542. And it really, while that speaks specifically to personal communication devices, we do acknowledge the fact that the use of any of our district provided systems, so that would be email, that would be Teams, any of the Microsoft ecosystem, our Canvas environment, there is no expectation of privacy within there, and we do utilize products such as Gaggle to monitor for specific types of activity within those ecosystems.
Could you tell me where in this policy it
Yes,
said we were
ma'am.
going to use
So that would be Actually, I think I misspoke. That was not 7542. So under, on policy 7540.04, which is the staff network, on lines 20, 21, we state that no users have no right to or expectation of privacy in the content of their personal files or records online while on district's network. And similarly, in 7540.03, lines 18 through 20 from a student network, acceptable use policy does cover that.
Okay, I'm sorry, what line was that in?
In 7540.03, it's lines 18 through 20.
I understand that we say that they have no expectation of rights, but we don't say that we're going to have programs that are going to be monitoring students. And I think that is important in that we are doing that within our district, that we have that as part of our policy. So they know that whatever is on the devices will be monitored by administration or our district. And then nowhere in these policies do we say that.
We can work towards including that.
Something that just
Language
makes
is
sure that we give notice to the community that we are monitoring our devices. Because all we say in here is there's just no expectation of privacy. But we're actually using some type of software to monitor.
The only other thing that I could state is that in policy 7540.03, lines 68 through 70, we do talk somewhat about reviewing browser history, computer logs, and items like that. However, we could include language specific to the actual content.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to limit us to Gaggle because we could change that, but the concept that they know whatever's done on those devices will be monitored.
We can provide something that would be a little bit more generic, but still have that basic flavor to ensure that we are actually monitoring indeed for content.
Thanks.
Thank you, Member Rendon. Anybody else? Okay, and we'll add that language and then we'll move on. Thank you, Dr. Weeks, for those 4 policies. Now we'll be moving on to Dr. DeLange. $9,800 policy of charter schools.
Good morning. All right. Okay. I don't have a lot. There was only one area where I had to change 60 days to 90 days to align with the statute. The rest of the changes were just tightening up the language and introducing a very specific Hillsborough County procedure in asking for the annual audits for charter schools.
Member Vaughn?
Thank you. I have one just kind of a strange question. Why on 239 to 241 or 237 was it changed from committee to team? Just curious.
Because we've never called it a committee in our office. We always call it a team. So we don't act as a committee with a chair or anything. So we just wanted to align that with our own procedures.
Thank you. And then under 57 to 60, where we crossed out 57 to 59 and instead are implementing 66 to 68, is that now, to my understanding, it's an automatic closure? That's what this is stating?
Yeah, so here I just switched the space where this language lives in the policy because the Florida statute 1002.33 has A through D. Actually, it's A through C now because they changed it. So the language of the double F lives in the accountability section of the statute. So I just wanted to remove it from A through C and put it somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Vaughn. Member Rendon?
I had a question about the double F this last go-around board meeting. So I think it'd be really good if we could have a definition put into the policy about what is a double F. Because if there's an interruption of a year where the grade does not establish, the double F doesn't count. It does so like if we had grade last year, no grade this year, grade next year, if the F is in between that, it doesn't count as a double F. So I think we need to I think we should define what double F is, because that to me didn't make any sense. So I think there should be a clarification of what double F means.
So that's a great question. I just don't know how legally, I'm not quite sure how legally that happens, because we've never had so many years where a school grade doesn't count. But I can certainly
We'll look at that. We'll be
yeah,
able to
I can certainly confer with legal and then reach out to the choice office to ask whether the consecutive Fs, does the F from 2020 count as the consecutive F?
Yeah, I think we as a board have, want to make sure that the priority is the education of our children. And so no matter what school they're under our umbrella, that we have that high expectation of student turnaround. So thank you for whatever that looks like legally. If we could include that in here, I think it's important. And I know our charter schools in our area really want to do a good job. So they want to make sure that it's taken care of just as much as everybody else.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Member Perez?
It's a quick question. On 1025 through 1027, it mentions no later than the May 30th of each year, the charter school, as far as the audit. And then 1163 to 1065, it says failure to comply is a material breach, but nowhere does it say what happens or how many times what's the result of being in breach of contract once that happens?
So are we talking about line 1190 or?
1,125, 1,100 through 1,127, and then going back over to 1,163 through 1,165. It speaks of the failure to comply to submit the statements, but what happens? How many times are they allowed to not?
I included this because it is a specific procedure that we request in Hillsborough County for the annual audits. We have never had an issue until Idea Public Schools came on board, and they pushed back on the date because they weren't ready to submit their audit. And the statute, unfortunately, says that they have like 9 months. So that's why we wanted to include specific dates. So we worked it out, whether with Idea Public Schools, where we got it later than all the others, but sooner than what they were requesting to submit it. This is why I wanted to tie it up in a policy, so any other charter school coming to Hillsborough County knew exactly when the annual audit is due to us.
So what I'm asking is, do you give them twice to do this, 3 times to do this, or once is, failure to comply?
It's failure to comply, so that's why we ask for a notice first. That way they're putting it in writing that they will commit to an annual audit by that date. And then we receive the annual audit on time. Again, it's never been an issue until Idea Public Schools, which, they're from Texas, so they're not too familiar with our policies, so they're getting to know us, they're getting to know the state of Florida, and they're getting to know Hillsborough County.
Thank you, Member Perez. Okay, thank you. That will conclude that part of the charter school policy. Thank you, Dr. DeLange, for everything. Thank you. Well, now I'll hand this over to Superintendent Ayers for the next portion of our meeting.
I just wanted to jump real quick to the third part of our agenda, which is about update and discussion on policy review. I think the examples that we just had here with Mr. Weeks and Ms. DeLange show what our staff is always doing. We're always reviewing policy. When there are changes, that's when they're bringing it forward. So I just want the board to understand that the process of reviewing policy is always happening. So I think from our end, and policies now will fall under Kristen and of course Dr. Whalen. I think it'll be an opportunity for us, because we're always reviewing policy, to just at this point, if there were no changes, to add dates to things. So I don't think from our first discussion around policy review, the process is in place. We just got to get a little better at adding dates of when we reviewed it. So I think that from our side will be a process that we'll move forward with. But I just wanted to kind of jump in there. That's an example of Mr. Weeks, Ms. DeLange. They're always looking at their policy. When there's changes, they know to make those changes. So I just wanted to add that, and we'll get on it.
Okay, thank you. And so now we're going to be looking at the 2023 legislation and rulemaking.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
So behind the tab that says the 2023 legislation and rulemaking is a chart that's also similar to a chart that we laid on your desk with a paper clip on it. They're the same item. I just wanted, first I'll highlight kind of what this is and then why you just have that second copy. So coming out of the 2023 legislative session, as you know, there were more than 50 education-related bills. Many of these you've already seen. We've had a workshop. We've gone through this. What the purpose of this document was, you'll see in front of you, it has the bill, the summary, but also a couple new columns. And what we're capturing here is, does the bill have required rulemaking? Is there required training? And is there required reporting? And of course, is it applicable to charter schools? So what you will find in that third column, required rulemaking, most of them do have the first stop of required rulemaking through the State Board of Education. And so that's what our staff is diligently following and tracking, is the proposed rulemaking amendments and new rules coming down from DOE and the State Board. And so we wanted to capture this in a document so you could see what was actually required in the bill. And then why you have that second copy is the far right column that says rulemaking updates. That's new, just recently added. I went through all of the DOE State Board rules adopted since the end of session and made notes for each bill on what rules have been amended or added. So that's why some columns are blank and then some actually have notes in them. And then you'll also see some may say not at this time or NA, and that's just because the bill right now does not require said header, whether it's training, rulemaking. However, when rulemaking does come out, that could change and we could have some requirements. So just wanted to highlight that overall, explain what that is. And this is, again, just another opportunity to keep you updated on what your team is working on regularly and following and tracking related to bills. And we will continue to bring this forward to you.
Thank you, Kristen Davis. And thank you for your countless hours, all your work. You really help us, immensely, and your organizational skills are unbelievable, really. Any board members want to comment on that rulemaking and all those? Member Vaughn, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I think I kind of alluded to this at the last meeting, but you and I have had a conversation about it, and I know that I'm queued up to speak with Ms. Fawcett about it. But I have been getting, even since the board meeting, and I'm wondering if other board members have, countless requests about opt-out options for some of the rulemaking and standards that are coming forward. And I heard, I'm not sure if it's true, but Pinellas is offering an opt-out for the U-Pager materials that were adopted by the Department of Education for teachers to use as supplemental materials. There's a form floating around online that I guess Pinellas is accepting, and I'm wondering about what that looks like for us, as well as I've gotten countless questions about opting out of the new Black History standard, which people have utilized and compared it to the sex education standard, which is a statute and a standard that parents have the option of opting out if they don't want their child subjected to that. And now I have parents who are also asking if they can opt out of some of the standards associated with teaching that slavery had benefits, trade benefits. So I'd like some answers for parents who are looking to opt out of the curriculum or standards or things that are coming forward, similar to the parental rights bill, and what that looks like. And I'd like to be able to give them answers for our district of what that looks like. So I don't know if that's something that we need to talk at a board meeting, if we need to send that out, or what the next step is, but I'd really like some action on that.
And Ms. Vaughn, what was the materials you had mentioned?
Yeah, I had PragerU, right? Is that what it is? Yeah, I think it's PragerU. It's PragerU. It's PRAGGE. Yeah, U. Okay. So I think we'll probably need some time to go back and look at that and review that. Member Perez, you had some comments on this as well?
Yeah, the same thing, same concerns that Member Vaughn has. I've had a large number of community members who are requesting that opt out.
Okay.
Okay, and since I think that's fairly new information, I think we'll just have to look into that. Anybody else with any questions or comments on this part of our policy making? Okay, I think the last page just shows us some of the redundant and duplicate policies. And Ms. Davis, if you wanted to kind of go over that last section.
Thank you. I think I know Mr. Ayers to talk about how we definitely have received direction from you today, and we appreciate that. Some of the document that's before you is just kind of an example of what we reviewed. We also are working alongside not only Mr. Porter, but our HR attorneys as well, to identify while there may be duplicates and perhaps redundants, there may be some where we actually can't combine them. So that's the sort of work that we will be coming back and bring back forward to you. So while we've identified this in response to, I know, some of the board's work, we will keep you updated on that, including the revised dates and maybe what can and what cannot be duplicated. So that'll be some of the work. Just wanted to show you some examples and steps along the way, keep you updated.
Okay, thank you. We still have 12 minutes remaining of this workshop. If there are any questions or comments, no? No further ado. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.